Jai Hind, Namaste, hello, and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav, and in this video, we'll be discussing selected topics from the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 21st of September. Now, in this video, we'll be discussing the following topics: China's nationalist turn under Xi Jinping. So, we'll see the evolution of Xi Jinping. This is a very interesting read, maybe not directly related to your examination, but it will help you evolve an understanding of what China is doing and why it is doing so, and what are the internal dynamics of Chinese politics. Then second, make ethics code must for all news channels, NBA tells the Supreme Court. So this is again related to the Sudarshan show Bindas Bowl, which was about the entry of Muslims into civil services, and it was a controversial show. Then there was case in Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has stopped its telecast. Then it asked the News Broadcasters Association to come up with a code of ethics which deals with such problems in future. Now NBA has given its affidavit to the Supreme Court. So we'll see what that affidavit is all about. Then government tables bill to amend FCRA. We have already discussed FCRA in detail in previous videos. So in this I'll be giving you a brief about FCRA again. Then we'll see what are the amendments and what are the advantages of these amendments and why these amendments are being brought in. So important. Then 12 parties give no trust notice against Deputy Speaker. So we saw the horrific scenes where the parliamentarians were not acting in a very parliamentarian manner. So this news is related to that the farm bills were passed, and because they were passed by voice vote, so there was a problem. So in this I will be telling you about what is voice vote, right? I will also tell you about the no trust notice that is served in the Rajya Sabha. It is different from a no confidence motion that is served in the Lok Sabha under Rule 198 of the Rules of Procedure of Lok Sabha. Then I will also tell you about the office of Deputy Speaker, and I will also be briefly telling you about the Speaker or the Chairman of Rajya Sabha, who is the Vice President of India, and he is the ex officio Chairman of Rajya Sabha as well. Then Great Power, Little Responsibility, International Peace Day. So 21st September is celebrated as International Peace Day by the UN, and it says that on this day people should observe non-violence and ceasefire for a day. Now it is important because UN is celebrating its 75th year. So in the coming days we'll be getting many more articles about UN, and all of these articles are important for this year's examination as well as the next year examination. So please pay attention. Now this article tells us about the problems to international peace. It tells us about things in Yemen, then what is happening in Libya, and the role of so-called superpowers and the permanent seat holders of UNSC, and how they are the ones who are actually fueling all these problems. So good read. Then Suspicious Activity Reports and Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. Now very important and good article. This is an Indian Express exclusive. It basically tells us about this SARS report and FinCEN network. FinCEN comes under the US Treasury Department, and it tracks the transactions which are dubious and which deal with black money, terror financing, round tripping, money laundering, etc. And what is the Indian connect? That the 2G scandal, the Augusta Westland and other scandals, the money trail also is related to this. And it basically says that between 1999 to 2017, at least $2 trillion of dubious transactions have taken place. So I will be telling you about SARS, FinCEN. I will also be telling you about money laundering. I will be telling you about shell companies, and also I will be telling you about round tripping. So this is important. Then WHO clears protocol for COVID-19 herbal medicine trials. So basically Madagascar has been using Artemisia based drink to counter COVID-19, and now WHO has given approval for phase 3 trials for herbal medicines to deal with COVID and other diseases. Now it will also be evolving a protocol, but there is a China connect which I will tell you when we discuss that article. Then World Bank seeks universal eligibility. Basically World Bank is giving 1 billion loan to India through IBRD, which is a specialized agency of World Bank. Now the special point about IBRD is that it gives long-term loans at very cheap or throwaway interest rates. So that is why this is very attractive for India. Now these loans were to help India in its fight against COVID, but it has put a universal eligibility. That means that basically government of India was trying to implement Make in India and Atmanirbhar program. Under this program, it had given special privileges to MSMEs and startups and Indian companies, but World Bank says that there should be universal eligibility. That means anybody should be able to apply for those tenders, be it Indian companies or foreign companies, and World Bank would also be auditing the reports that are filed under this project, and it has made it mandatory. So sort of a setback for our domestic industry, but we need the money, so we are accepting these terms. So let's get started. No confidence motion against Deputy Speaker. So in this article, we'll be discussing what is voice vote, what is no confidence motion. It is not the same as what we see under 198 of Rules of Procedure of the Lok Sabha. This is against the Deputy Speaker. So this is given under the rules of Rajya Sabha, and we'll see what that is all about. We'll also look at some rules of procedure that are relevant here, and we'll also look at the office of the Deputy Speaker. So yesterday the two farm bills were basically passed by voice vote in the Rajya Sabha, and because of that we had to see some horrific scenes, and that really puts a question in our minds that what sort of people we send to the parliament and what they do. Basically whatever they did has really brought down the dignity of the house. The entire world watches what we do. At least they should have that shame, right? Again, now let us see what is happening. Rajya Sabha members of 12 opposition parties moved a no confidence resolution against Rajya Sabha deputy chairman over the passage of two controversial farm bills by voice vote. But this no confidence resolution has been rejected by the chairman of Rajya Sabha because he said it does not follow the rules. Basically, that no confidence motion has to be given on a 14-day notice to the deputy chairman. So that procedure was not followed. That is why the chairman has removed. Now, regarding the chairman of Rajya Sabha is the vice president. I've told you earlier as well that vice president of India is the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha, and that is his constitutional position. The vice president officiates the office of president only when the president is ill or he's not able to discharge his duties, or God forbid he dies, or he resigns, or he's impeached from the office. These are very rare instances, but the vice president does not necessarily replace the president, because as soon as the president is removed from office or he resigns or dies or whatever, elections are to be held again. So the vice president only holds the position of president for a temporary period till a new incumbent is not in place. So the vice president is, the constitutional position of the vice president is that he is the ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Please do not forget that. So in this news, we'll be covering an important part from your polity syllabus as well. Now let us see what is voice vote. So what is voice vote? It involves the speaker putting a question to the house and then asking the house to put forward its opinion in the forms of ayes and noes. Now basically what the chair has said that they had the numbers, so there was no need to go for voting by ballot. So that is why the chair, at that time it was the deputy speaker, he ordered voice vote. It is based on a rough measure of which side was louder. The speaker decides if the motion was passed or fell through. One more thing, the chairperson of the Lok Sabha is called speaker, and the chair of the Rajya Sabha is called chairperson or chairman. Always remember that, okay? The advantage of a voice vote is that it is quick, because it would take a lot of time, and we know that basically this session of parliament is being conducted under special circumstances. So the government is saying that we actually don't have that much of time. So many MPs have already gotten corona. So they are trying to move things ahead or at a very fast pace. So this was put through voice vote. But it seems like the opposition parties had already planned all of this, because it seemed very planned to me personally. I don't know. But whatever they did, they shouldn't have done that. The apparent disadvantage is that it is inaccurate, given that the speaker decides what the opinion of the house is based on which side is louder. So there is a discrepancy there, but speaker or the deputy speaker, they actually have a idea of what the opinion is, and they are in constant touch with the government. So probably what that government has told them, whatever happened, I'm not favoring any government, but this conduct was not good because, like I said, the entire world watches us. We make fun of Pakistani parliamentarians, the kind of things they do in their parliament, and look at us, what we are doing. Whatever your disagreements may be, but this is not the way to behave in the parliament. Now, what is no confidence vote? The no confidence resolution is for the removal of the deputy chairman. Because the chairman cannot be removed in the no confidence manner, there is certain different method for his removal because he is the vice president of India. It is not as the same as the no confidence motion specified in Rule 198 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Lok Sabha. Now today on my Instagram page, I have shared about this no confidence motion that is conducted in Lok Sabha. So if you're interested, so please go to our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. You can find the relevant material there, which can lead to the resignation of the Council of Ministers. Now, some precedents on which no confidence motions have been passed against or have been initiated against the chairman or the speaker. Earlier resolutions moved against the first Lok Sabha speaker, G.V. Mavalankar in 1951. So important point is, who was the first Lok Sabha speaker? G.V. Mavalankar, and against him there was a no confidence motion or resolution. Speaker Sardar Hukum Singh in 1966 and Speaker Balram Jakhar in 1987. All of these resolutions were negated by the House, and similarly this resolution, the latest one, has been rejected by the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, that is the vice president, because 14-day prior notice has not been served. Relevant rules of procedures and conduct of business. Rule 256, which goes for suspension of member. This is decided by the presiding officer of the House on the grounds like member disregarding the authority of the chair or abusing the rules of the council. But unfortunately, those unruly MPs have been only suspended for a week. Rule 258 of the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of Business in Rajya Sabha makes provision to enable a member to raise a point of order. It provides as follows. So a member can raise a point of order under Rule 258. Any member may make at any time submit a point of order for the decision of the chairman. The chairman's decision shall be final in this regard. So basically, that member raises an issue, but it is the chairman who will finally take the decision. Now regarding the deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha, now both the chairman and deputy chairman of Rajya Sabha are described under Article 89 of the Constitution. The deputy chairman is elected by the Rajya Sabha itself from amongst its members. The post of deputy chairman is not subordinate to the chairman. The deputy chairman performs the duties of the chairman's office when it is vacant or when the vice president acts as president or discharges the functions of the president. He also acts as the chairman when the chairman is absent from sitting of the House. In both cases, he has all the powers of the chairman. And like the chairman, the deputy chairman, while presiding over the House, cannot vote in the first instance. This is called a casting vote. So the presiding officer, either of the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha, they do not vote in the first instance. They are basically supposed to act in a bipartisan manner. But when there is a tie, then they get to vote, and that vote is known as the casting vote. And that vote is basically to break the tie. He can only exercise a casting vote in the case of a tie. Now the procedure for removal. According to Article 90 of the Constitution, the deputy chairman vacates his office in any of the three cases. If he ceases to be a member of Rajya Sabha. We have also discussed about Rajya Sabha. The other day we discussed the committees of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So I told you that 1/3 of members of Rajya Sabha, they retire every 2 years, and the tenure of one member is 6 years, right? So if he ceases to be a member of Rajya Sabha, then automatically he would not be a deputy chairman. If he resigns by writing to the chairman, and if he is removed by a resolution passed by a majority of all the then members of the Rajya Sabha, and this resolution is moved under the Rules of Procedure and Conduct of the Rajya Sabha. Such a resolution can be moved only after giving 14 days advance notice. So here the 14 days advance notice was not given. So the chairman of Rajya Sabha has rejected this motion for removal of the deputy chairman. So this is all about this news. I hope that in future we don't get to see such unruly behavior in the parliament. International Day of Peace. Now basically 21st of September each year is observed as the International Day of Peace. The theme for 2020 is Shaping Peace Together. The United Nations General Assembly has declared this as a day devoted to strengthening the ideas of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. So wherever there is a conflict, they say that for 24 hours this day don't follow any violence and please observe ceasefire. Now the background, the International Day of Peace was established in 1981 by the United Nations General Assembly. In 2001, the General Assembly unanimously voted to designate the day as period of non-violence and ceasefire. So established in 1981 and in 2001 they said that you mark this day by non-violence and ceasefire. Now this year United Nations is celebrating its 75th anniversary, so we'll be getting a lot of news from UN in the coming days. The United Nations will be celebrating its 75th year on 24th October 2020. So that is why these news are important for this year and probably the next year, because UN is completing its 75 years. Now this article also tells us about the current challenges to global peace, because these so-called superpowers and the veto holders of the UNSC, though on paper they talk about peace and stability, but their actions have been anything but those connected with peace and stability. So it tells us about their activities. So challenges to global peace. Global unrests. Over 25 countries are facing deadly wars today. According to the World Population Review, 8 countries including Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, Turkey, Somalia, Iraq, Mexico and Libya suffered at least 1,000 deaths, each through militarized conflicts and battles in 2019. So these are all the disturbed areas. Refugee crisis. Now because of unrest, there is also a refugee crisis. According to UN Refugee Agency, 79.5 million were displaced at the end of 2019 due to armed conflicts, persecution and other reasons. Now see what happens. There is unrest in one region. Now to escape that unrest, people as refugees, they migrate to some other place. Now when they go to other place, then there could be problems, as we are seeing now in Europe. Now these European powers who used to preach human rights and all of that to us, now when they are facing all these issues, they are basically showing their true colors. Role of global powers. The USA, Russia and China are required to uphold peace and international harmony, being the permanent members of the UNSC. However, on the contrary, they have been found to fuel instability in order to achieve geopolitical hegemony. Examples are the tragedy in Yemen, which the UN has declared as the worst humanitarian disaster. So the tragedy in Yemen is the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Is the outcome of indiscriminate attack by the US-backed coalition of Saudi Arabia and UAE, whose geopolitical goal is to counterbalance Iran. And I also told you, because of the pullback of US from the region, now Saudi Arabia, UAE, all the Arab countries are moving closer to Israel to basically counterbalance Iran. Libya's descent into chaos is the product of the active involvement of mercenaries and weapons pumped by in Russia and USA allied Gulf Arab monarchies to push back the Turkey's influence. Now again in Libya, what is happening? There are different players. There is Turkey, right? And there is Russia and there is US. All of them are pumping weapons and money into this region, and that is leading to more instability. Domestic suppression, domestic surveillance and repression with the use of technology is being used by countries to suppress dissenting voices. For example, China has developed a very sophisticated network for their domestic audience as well. They use everything from traffic cameras to your credit card statements to your metro card swipes, and they make a whole biography or a whole profile of you, and they know everything about you. New power tussle. Because of the conflict and competition between powerful countries like USA and China, new Cold War is going on, risking global peace. And we are seeing the actions of China, and now US is also getting involved, be it South China Sea or be it Taiwan. And US is also trying to get into this LAC standoff because it is making statements in favor of India. Pandemic challenge. COVID-19 has posed a new concern that may directly and indirectly affect global peace through lack of access to resources, health, education, displacement, etc. So this is a very good read, and the challenges to global stability, what all we have covered, they are very, very important for your mains. Government tables bill to amend FCRA. Now we have discussed in detail what is FCRA in previous videos, so I'll give you a quick recap. Now FCRA stands for Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Bill 2020. Now what is FCRA? Basically it regulates all the foreign fundings that NGOs or other such associations get. Now why is it necessary? It is necessary because it is to check that the funds that these organizations are getting are not detrimental to the integrity, sovereignty, national security, or the national interests of our country. Because there could be many situations in which vested interests are giving them money to conduct certain operations or certain movements within India. And this issue has been a very hot issue for quite some time. For example, when the Kudunkulam nuclear reactor was being inaugurated, so basically it was a Russian-built nuclear plant. So NGOs that were financed by American companies like GE were basically protesting against this. So there have been many instances where NGOs have been getting money, and some cases NGOs have been getting money from extremist organizations to run propaganda in India. So the Home Ministry, see, under FCRA, the Home Ministry is the implementing agency. So Home Ministry has come heavily on many NGOs, and more than 25,000 NGOs have already lost their licenses. Some have been put into the pre-approval category. That means that they would be able to access funds on a case by case basis, but that would be subject to prior approval by the Ministry of Home Affairs. Another thing, what these NGOs or scamsters they do, basically, for example, if they get 100 rupees from funding, they would spend 50 rupees to 70 rupees, and they would show it that it is administrative expense, and rest 50 or 30 rupees they would actually spend on the welfare work. So this way they would swindle money, and this was one of the ways to basically bribe people in India, government officials, because there's a so-called lawyer called Indra Jaising, and when she was Assistant Solicitor General, she received money from a foreign company in her NGO. This is against the laws of the government. And she said that she was not a government servant but a public servant, so she could get that money. So government has now amended this FCRA to end all this discrepancy. So now let us see. What is FCRA? The act, first enacted in 1976, regulates foreign donations and ensures that such contributions do not adversely affect the internal security of the country. What are the proposed changes? Proposes to make Aadhaar a mandatory identification document for all. The office bearers, directors, and other key functionaries of an NGO or an association eligible to receive foreign donations would be required to give their Aadhaar on a mandatory basis. To include public servant and corporation owned or controlled by the government among the list of entities who are not eligible to receive foreign donations. So public servant was because of that Indra Jaising thing. So that's why they changed it from the government servant to public servant. Again, one important thing, not more than 20% of foreign funds received could be defrayed for administrative expenses. At present, they were swindling basically 50% of the money that was going directly into the pockets of the so-called NGO people, and rest 50 was getting spent on other things. Now they have capped it to 20%. So this is a very good thing, because most of these NGO owners, what they do, they basically play to the galleries. They would show you that they lead a very simple life, but they would be having crores and crores of rupees into their bank accounts because they are swindling money. So very good step. Why the need for changes? To enhance transparency and accountability in the receipt and utilization of foreign contributions worth thousands of crores of rupees every year, and for facilitating the genuine NGOs or associations who are working for the welfare of the society. Because see, under FCRA, the compliance is very easy. You have to file a yearly return and a compliance form But it is easy or simple only for those who are abiding the rules. Those who are swindling money, they find it difficult, and that's where the whole problem begins. So the government has come up with very good piece of legislation. FinCEN files. So this is again an Indian Express exclusive, and it comes on the heels of the hybrid warfare and the expose that they did on the Chinese company, which is doing a very sophisticated spying activity on high profile entities in India. Now this is also related to India. Now basically FinCEN is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network of United States Department of Treasury. And it basically gives out report called the Suspicious Activity Report, which banks provide to the FinCEN network. Now, what are these suspicious activity reports? These are basically red flagged financial transactions that banks send to FinCEN, and they tell them that these activities are financially dubious and they need to be probed. Now, basically, within 30 days of that transaction, the information is sent. But the only problem is that these reports cannot be used legally to prove a case, but otherwise they are very, very good. So this organization is functioning similar to, if you remember, FATF, which is basically also looking at terror financing. So FinCEN not only looks at terror financing, but also at round tripping and money laundering, shell companies, and all things like that. So let us look into it. Over 2100 suspicious activity reports (SARS) were filed by banks with the United States Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or the FinCEN. The FinCEN identifies at least $2 trillion in transaction between 1999 and 2017. So you see at least $2 trillion of black money, flagged as possible evidence of money laundering or other criminal activity by compliance officers of banks and financial institutions. Now basically what is money laundering? Like laundering, you wash something. So in money laundering, what you do, you basically remove the trail of dirty money and you try to convert it into white money. About FinCEN, it was set up in 1990 and it serves as a leading global regulator in the battle against money laundering. It collects and analyzes information about financial transactions in order to combat domestic and international money laundering, terrorist financing, and other financial crimes. And even all the proceedings of crimes like 2G scam and Augusta Westland scams, they have also been covered under the FinCEN file. So that is the Indian connect of this report. Suspicious Activity Report, or the SAR, is a document filed by banks and financial institutions to report suspicious activity to the USA FinCEN. These are meant to red flag within 30 days of transactions occurrence, criminal funds or any form of dirty money, insider trading, potential money laundering, terror financing, any transaction that raises suspicion. So any suspicious transaction is reported to the FinCEN under SAR. These are used to detect crime but cannot be used as direct evidence to prove legal cases. So that is the only problem. There are details of banking transactions that give a clear indication of round tripping, money laundering, or dealings with shell-like entities. So money laundering, I told you, it is about losing the trail or laundering the trail of dirty money and converting it into white money. Round tripping is another concept relating to money laundering only, that black money is sent abroad and then through shell companies it is pumped back into our country. For example, you would be surprised to know that for so many years, major source of FDI into India used to be Mauritius. Now Mauritius is such a small company, so how come the money is coming? Because there were many shell companies registered in Mauritius. Now shell companies are basically registered in tax havens. What are tax havens? Basically they don't charge any tax on the companies that are registered there. So these companies, these shell companies are basically formed in countries where there are tax havens and that have some DTAA agreement with another country. Basically DTAA means double taxation avoidance agreement. For example, if I am a company registered in Mauritius and I'm doing business with a company in India, so I will pay tax only in Mauritius. I don't need to pay tax in India. Now in Mauritius, tax rate is 0 or 1%. So I save so much money, but this is a way of tax evasion. See, there are two things, tax evasion and tax avoidance. Evasion means that you are using unscrupulous means to save your tax, which are not legal. And tax avoidance means that you are using legal methods to save on your taxes. So basically, this SAR document under FinCEN, it is covering activities like round tripping, money laundering, shell entities, and closely related to all this is also terror financing. FinCEN shares SARs with law enforcement authorities including FBI, US Immigration and Customs. Now, what is the significance? The FinCEN files highlights the dangers of correspondent banking. Now, what is correspondent banking? Basically, for example, this is India and this is Mauritius. Now, you are sending money from Mauritius to India in bank, for example, A to bank B. Now, they are not the same bank. So, a correspondent bank is like an intermediary between bank A and bank B, and it would facilitate transfer of funds from country Mauritius to India from bank A to bank B. And they basically take a cut. Now, these correspondent bankers are the culprits here. The term correspondent bank refers to a financial institution that provides services to another one, usually in another country. It acts as an intermediary or agent facilitating wire transfers, conducting business transactions, accepting deposits, and gathering documents on behalf of another bank. And that is where they basically do their dirty tricks. Significance for India. Individuals and companies being probed by Indian agencies in different cases are part of the SAR flagged to FinCEN. Like transactions of Indian entities named in scams such as the 2G scam, the Augusta Westland scam, etc., cases have been listed with the FinCEN. So this is the Indian angle. Again, very important news. Now, what is round tripping? This refers to money that leaves the country through various channels and makes its way back into the country, often as foreign investment. I told you that Mauritius used to be a very big source of FDI. This mostly involves black money and is allegedly often used for stock price manipulation. Money laundering is concealing or disguising the identity of illegally obtained proceedings so that they appear to have originated from legitimate sources. So like I said, it is like removing the dirty trail of black money and converting it into white money. For example, with black money, you buy art and then you sell art. So basically, when you get the money, it is being converted into white money. So there are many things like luxury items, art items, which are sold at very high price because a lot of black money is invested into that. It is frequently a component of other much more serious crimes such as drug trafficking, robbery, or extortion. Now, shell companies I've also told you. Now imagine in a building, in a small building or in a small office, there would be 20 to 30 companies that are registered there. So they basically don't do any business. They are just facilitating transfer of funds. So they are basically registered into a tax haven like Mauritius or some other country. Shell companies are typically corporate entities which do not have any active business operations or significant assets in their possession. The government views them with suspicion as some of them could be used for money laundering, tax evasion, and other illegal activities. Even movies, they are also a very big source for investment of black money and money laundering. So this is all about this FinCEN and SAR report. Important news. China's nationalist turn under Xi Jinping. Now, very interesting read this article. This basically tells us how Xi Jinping rose to power. It could be inspiring to some people as well. And it tells us how he consolidated the power under his reign and how he plans to become the next great leader of China. And it is this man, essentially this man, that is leading to destabilization of the world in the current scenario. Because he is the one who's picking up fight with India, Japan, Russia, US, Taiwan, everywhere. And why? Just to emerge as the strongest leader in China. He is selling a new version of Chinese nationalism, hyper-nationalism to the people, and they are lapping it up. So let us see what his story is. Now, Xi Jinping had to apply no less than 8 times before getting into the Communist Youth League, an organization for the young party members. So basically, his father was a hero of the communist movement, but he had a falling out with Mao Zedong, and because of that, he had many problems. When Xi grew up, he also had to face many problems and he had to cut many corners to get ahead in his career. So his story is somewhat inspiring as well. He then had to again apply 10 times before Communist Party accepted him, all because of his family's history. His father, Yi Zhongyun, was Red Royalty, a hero of the Communist Revolution, but he would later fall out with Mao Zedong and had to endure humiliating public struggle sessions at the hands of Mao's Red Guards. So this is his background and that has some impact on his psyche. Taking over. Within 5 years of taking over from Hu Jintao in 2012, Xi established himself in the party lexicon as the third great leader after Mao and Deng Xiaoping. In the short span of time, he has dismantled the collective leadership. So China had a system of collective leadership. Basically, the Communist Party, the core member of the Politburo, they would take collective decisions and premier would implement those decisions. So the decision making was collective in the true communist sense, but he dismantled this collective decision making system because of many factors, and he was fortunate enough to ascend to the highest office when there were many things working against this collective leadership. So he was lucky as well, but he successfully dismantled this collective leadership system in China. Restructuring the party. Now under him, the party has spread its tentacles throughout the machinery of the Chinese state. So the lines between the party and the government have increasingly blurred. Let us see. Restructuring the party. Dramatically restructured the party state apparatus, giving the party greater say in the running of the country. Xi has centralized power by setting up a number of leading small groups. Now these leading small groups are very important because they are micromanaging the Chinese state and they cover everything from national security to economic reforms to foreign policy. So in effect, Xi controls everything. He's micromanaging everything in China. But with such great power also comes great responsibility. So the pressure on Xi himself is very, very high that he has to deliver, because the day he stops delivering and performing, the discontent against him would also rise very soon. In fact, there are signs within the Chinese state that some of his opponents are gaining voice, but he is using the purge mechanism. I discussed this, that he is using anti-corruption mechanism to get rid of his rivals. But it is to be seen for how long he can do that and for how long can he continue to perform and deliver. Now, if looking at it, Xi has seriously failed in the recent times because of the COVID, his handling of the COVID, then the flood problem with China that the Chinese did not let the world know about, and his foreign policy, the aggressiveness. Many say that his foreign policy, the aggressiveness, is one of the ploys to divert attention from the internal problems of China and open fronts outside China so that people don't really speak up against him. This extends to foreign policy as well. In effect, Xi controls everything. He's already the president of China. Now he's looking to become the chairman for life after Mao. So only Mao Zedong was chairman for life of the Communist Party. Now he's looking to be the same person and he's already the president for life. That means till the time he does not die, he will be virtually ruling China. But if he becomes the chairman for life, then his rule would be absolute because then he would not have to hand back power. Now what explains Xi's rise? Xi knows the ins and outs of party like few others because he belonged to the Red Royalty, as they call it, the super generals of the Communist Party. So he lived the growing years of his life in Beijing and he was familiar with the power corridors. So that has helped him. Then again, luck played a role. Xi was lucky enough to arrive at just the moment in history when his consolidation of power was appealing to the Chinese public and most other Chinese leaders because, like I said, they were voices against the collective decision-making process that was happening in China, and people were not happy with it because there were many groups within the Communist Party and they were basically pulling the party in different directions. So there was a public opinion as well as an opinion among the leaders that there needs to be a strong leader, and Xi perfectly fit that role. Before he came to power, there were many negative feelings about the collective leadership system inside the party. What helped him in his quest was his assembly of strong loyalist networks in the party, particularly among his young fellow Red generation. That is, his friends and his contemporaries, they were all loyal to him, called the Hong Gerda. Now, because of this Hong Gerda, he has been able to take tough decisions, and they have been the implementing force of those decisions. Now, selling the Chinese dream. The party under Xi is turning the brilliant political imagination of thousands of years of Chinese civilization to successfully fill the spiritual vacuum left by weakening of the communist vision. So he is basically reviving the Chinese civilization. That is why I have told you, whenever they make a claim, what they say? Historical maps. They claim over Nepal, saying historical maps. Make claims over South China Sea, historical maps. They say that Mount Everest is ours, historical maps. So they are always invoking their history. In fact, you would be surprised to know that in Chinese curriculum, in the schools, they teach about the age of humiliation, when basically China was divided among the colonist powers. None of them ruled China directly. It was called the cutting of Chinese melon. So they teach the students that this is the humiliation your country had to face, and you have to be motivated enough that your country never falls into that ditch. So he's using a mixture of hyper nationalism with civilizational reinvigoration, and that is really how he's selling the Chinese dream. A sense of national self-confidence and feeling of pride are the party's biggest asset. So he is becoming absolute leader of the Chinese state, and he dreams of being the world leader someday. That is why his actions are so aggressive. So overall, his story can be inspiring to some, but it is very important to understand his psychology and the way he's conducting politics, because what he's doing inside China is also affecting the entire world. More so, what he is facing inside China, that is directly affecting the India-China border standoff as well, because he's trying to create his strongman image, and one of the ways of imposing that is to pick up fights with India. Make ethics code must for all news channels, NBA tells Supreme Court. So the backdrop of this is the Bindas Bol show on Sudarshan TV, which made objectionable content against the entries of Muslims into the civil services, right? So I have already told you that they were pleased to stop the telecast of the program. Now they were pleased even before the program was telecast. So Supreme Court said that the concept of pre-censorship is very dangerous in a democracy. Now, since 3 to 4 episodes had been aired, Supreme Court reviewed that, and it asked the channel to stop its telecast of this particular program. Now, Sudarshan TV has again filed an appeal, and they said that we will follow all the guidelines, but let us telecast the program. Now, in this background, the Supreme Court asked the News Broadcasters Association to come up with a code of ethics. So, the News Broadcasters Association, they filed an affidavit, and they said that there should be a code of ethics against airing of malicious, biased and regressive content, and it should be applicable to all the channels. So this is the background. Now we'll see what the affidavit says. Now that affidavit is in response to the order by Supreme Court to suggest steps to strengthen the self-regulatory mechanism to prevent or penalize airing of communal or derogatory content on electronic media. Now see, this word self-regulatory is very, very important, because it should not be regulation by government, because that would tantamount to censorship of media by the government, which is not healthy in any democracy. So there should be some form of an autonomous body which should go for self-regulation within that industry. For example, we have Press Council of India, which goes for self-regulation within the newspapers industry. So similarly, there should be some self-regulatory mechanism for electronic media as well. Now, what else does the affidavit say? The NBA suggested that the court direct the government to include its ethical code in program code of the Television Network Rules 1994. So Television Network Rules 1994, under which they get license to basically uplink and downlink data or programs on the network. So they are saying that include ethical code within the program code of this rules. All news channels, whether they are NBA members or not, will then have to follow the program code containing the proposed amendments. News Broadcasters Service Authority (NBSA) should be granted recognition as an independent self-regulatory mechanism to receive and deal with complaints. Again, independent and self-regulatory, no government interference. The order passed by the NBSA should be made binding and enforceable on all the channels. Recognition to the NBSA would strengthen the news broadcasting standards regulation. So that is why regulation is mandatory or necessary. Primarily, submission to the NBSA regulatory mechanism should be made mandatory for granting renewal of uplinking and downlinking permissions by the government. So there should be a regulatory mechanism, and to have any renewal or granting of license of uplinking or downlinking, you should be submitting to NBSA. And while government gives the permissions, it should take into consideration any previous orders that have been passed by NBSA. So these are the suggestions that NBA has sent to the Supreme Court in its affidavit. Now let us see what Supreme Court comes up with. But this Bindas Bowl issue could get big because it has implication. And basically this channel, it also made a petition in the court. It said that in 2006 that NDTV also aired a show which showed sadhus when it made a show on Hindu terror, so-called Hindu terror, and that showed sadhus and other religious marks of Hinduism while they were talking about saffron terror, and that show was hosted by Barkha Dutt. So basically that this Sudarshan news channel is calling out the double standards that are being followed by the petitioners or probably the court. Now let us see what finally happens, but this issue has the potential to become something very big in future. World Bank sees universal eligibility. Now basically World Bank had come up with Government of India for a 1 billion program for strengthening our corona fight. So we were basically getting a loan of $1 billion from World Bank IBRD, which is an arm of World Bank, and it basically gives long-term loans at very low rates of interest. Now the problem is that they have said that there should be universal eligibility because Government of India was pushing Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, because they said that all the components and everything that would be buying would be from Indian companies, or we would give priority to MSME sector or startups. There were provisions like that, but because of this universal eligibility, they all would have to be scrapped now. So let us see. The 1 billion World Bank loan to prevent, detect and respond to the threat of coronavirus and strengthen national health systems for preparedness comes with the condition of universal eligibility in procurements. Because see, World Bank is again run by vested interests, basically the Americans and other big capitalist countries, and they wouldn't want that this money should completely be absorbed into the Indian economy. They would also want a share out of that. So that is why they are asking us to remove this universal eligibility. India COVID-19 Emergency Response and Health System Strengthening Project. So this was the project, a joint initiative of the Government of India and the World Bank that has 1 billion loan disbursed by the IBRD. I already told you that IBRD gives long-term loans at very concessional rates of interest, and that is why this is very attractive for India. This would mean that all preferential market access policies that we were giving earlier, including public procurement, preference to Make in India, order, micro, small and medium enterprises, MSME policy. Remember yesterday I told you about MSME policies, and I also told you in detail about MSMEs. I hope you remember. Certain benefits to startups shall not be applicable to purchases made while implementing the national project. The World Bank would also have the right to review the procurement documents, inspect, audit all accounts, records and other files relating to the project. Compliance to these conditions has been mandatory for the funding. So unfortunately, we'll have to cut all these provisions that we were earlier going to give under this program. Now another good thing, mandatory service for MD students. So all the students from 2021-22 session who would be pursuing MD or MS in India, they would have to mandatorily serve 3 months in rural settings or in district hospitals on a rotational basis. And this program is called District Residency Program. It would basically help these students as well as the public health in India. So let us see the important points. The central government has made it mandatory for all students pursuing MD or MS to undergo compulsory residential rotation at the district hospital for 3 months, starting from 2021 academic session. And this program is known as District Residency Program. Now, the main objectives of the district residency program are to expose the students to district health system and involve them in healthcare services being provided at district hospitals for learning while serving the citizens. So a very, very good thing. Acquaint them with the planning, implementation, monitoring and assessments of outcomes of the national programs. But unfortunately, because of the high privatization of medical education in our country, not many doctors who do MS or MD would actually want to work at the district level or rural level, because they have themselves invested such a huge amount of money, for example 1 crore or 2 crore rupees for just doing MS or MD or some specialization. So they also want a return on their investment. So that is why they don't work there. And because of lack of that, the health system at the grassroots level really suffers. So probably this way we would be able to get some sort of support from these specialized doctors at the grassroots level. So again, a good initiative. WHO clears protocol for COVID-19 herbal medicine trials. So basically, Madagascar was using a herbal drink which is said could help fight coronavirus. So basically, people made fun of Madagascar and they said things about it, but now WHO has given green signals that Madagascar can go for phase 3 trial. Now, an important thing is that which is not been reported in this article is that WHO was trying to push Chinese traditional medicines as a way to combat COVID. It was published on their website and then it was basically exposed by some news channels. And we all know that China has a very strong grip over WHO. It is a compromised organization. So maybe this facade that they are carrying out is basically to legitimize Chinese herbal medicine in future. Just in this video, I told you about how Xi Jinping is selling the Chinese hyper-nationalism and he's, reintegrating or reinvigorating the Chinese civilization. So this herbal medicine thing is also one of his goals. So let us see what this news says. WHO endorsed a protocol for testing African herbal medicines as potential treatments for coronavirus and other epidemics. Using traditional medicines to battle contemporary diseases, and the endorsement clearly encouraged testing with criteria similar to those used for molecules developed by labs in Asia, Europe and America. See, Asia. Now ultimately it will come to China. Madagascar has been promoting a drink based on Artemisia, a plant with proven efficacy in malaria treatment. If you remember, there was a big hue and cry about hydrochloroquine and Trump said that it is effective, I take it every day and India must send it. So hydrochloroquine is also very highly effective in malaria treatment and Artemisia is also related to malaria treatment. WHO endorsed a protocol for phase 3 clinical trials of herbal medicine for COVID-19 as well as a charter and terms of reference for the establishment of a data and safety monitoring board for herbal medicine clinical trials. But I am not very sure about WHO because they might be trying to promote Chinese herbal medicine through the back door through this initiative. We'll see in the coming days. So that is all for this video, folks. I hope this was helpful. If you like our video, please subscribe to our channel and also please press the bell icon so that you don't miss out on any new video that we post. Also, if you found this helpful, please push the like button and do connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. Lots of stuff there as well. So see you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe and have a great day. Namaste and Jai Hind.